the ultimate betrayal. The most potent symbol of global capitalism, New York City, is being intentionally sabotaged, or so say the sources, by the very leadership elected to protect it. We are not just observing a policy disagreement, we're witnessing an unprecedented rapid economic jailbreak. Hundreds of millions of dollars in wealth are stampeding south, fundamentally redrawing America's financial map in real time, all because the city's proclaimed people's mayor promised justice, but, according to critics, delivered economic destruction. Is this truly just incompetence, or is it a calculated surrender of the city's economic foundation in pursuit of an ideological fantasy? We are going to unpack the hard data and the shocking anecdotes that define this collapse. Stay with us as we break this down in our in-depth discussion right here on News Focus Podcast. And if you find our reporting valuable, please hit the like button and subscribe to support our channel. We truly appreciate it.
That framing, that sense of betrayal, is exactly what we find running through the source material. And it's what distinguishes this moment from, previous periods of urban decline.
How so?
Well, this isn't a reaction to a recession or a natural disaster. Critics argue this exodus is a predictable consequence of a specific, radical agenda being implemented. The productive class is, quite literally, voting with their assets and their tax filings.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the architect of these policies, the man at the center of this financial firestorm, Mayor Zoran Mamdani. He's only 34 years old, framed by his supporters as the new people's mayor. But the sources we've reviewed use much stronger language.
Much stronger.
They don't just call him a progressive. They frame him as a radical discipline of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. For our listeners who may not track political acronyms daily, what exactly does that affiliation imply in terms of practical policy?
It implies a governance model fundamentally opposed to traditional free market principles, especially concerning private property and capital accumulation.
So it's a completely different philosophy.
Completely. When critics frame him as a DSA proponent, they are pointing to a core agenda that prioritizes the redistribution of wealth and control over private markets.
Right.
We see this translated into several highly disruptive policies.
Right.
The immediate mandate for free buses, the indefinite rent freeze on a large chunk of the housing market.
And the plan for government grocery stores, which we'll get to.
Yes. And the explicit push towards police defunding and restructuring. It's not one policy. It's a holistic package designed to reshape the city's entire economic and social contract.
And the immediate economic fallout, according to financial reporting, has been astonishingly rapid.
Almost immediate.
We're talking about more than just white-collar angst. Fox Business reports that real estate agents in high-end Florida markets are being mobbed by former New Yorkers escaping what they perceive as political madness.
Mobbed, that's the word they use.
And one major developer specifically confirmed that he saw hundreds of millions in New York money pouring into Palm Beach and Miami in just the last quarter.
That speed of capital movement is the key differentiator here.
100%.
In finance, speed signals fear. When hundreds of millions move in 90 days, it suggests that investors view these policy changes not as regulatory adjustments, but as immediate existential threats to property rights and investment stability.
So they're not just hedging their bets.
No, they're cashing out. They are calculating that the risk of staying outweighs the cost of moving.
And this movement has sparked a potent political counter-narrative, primarily from the states that are, receiving this influx of capital.
Of course.
Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida used some particularly strong language, arguing that New York's leadership has turned ballistic podiatry. That is, shooting yourself in the foot into an art form.
It's a powerful metaphor because it clarifies the nature of the crisis.
How so?
Well, critics argue that Mamdani's policies are not defensive measures against external economic hardship. They are the offensive weapon causing the injury.
So it's self-inflicted.
Entirely. When a leader actively chooses policies like freezing private income streams, indefinitely or dramatically increasing non-revenue generating services, that inherently caused the high-tax, high-productivity citizens to evacuate. That is what critics call ballistic podiatry. It is a self-inflicted wound.
And DeSantis, by using that language, what's his play there?
He's attempting to connect the blue state ideological agenda directly to red state economic competency. He's making the argument that the visible results of Mamdani's administration are a national warning signal.
So if the goal was, as Mamdani claims, to create greater equity, the outcome, according to these sources, has been accelerated economic flight.
The exact opposite of the stated goal.
Let's transition now and focus on the mechanics of the policy failures. We need to go beyond the rhetoric and examine the two policies cited as causing the greatest and most immediate financial panic.
We must. And we have to look at these not just as social programs, but as financial operations.
What do you mean by that?
For large-scale investors, the free bus revolution and the rent-freeze bombshell weren't just headlines. They were risk assessments that fundamentally changed the viability of long-term investment in New York property and infrastructure.
Okay, let's begin with the free bus revolution. Mamdani's claimed rationale is rooted in a financial problem: fare evasion.
Right.
He cites that fare evasion costs the MTA, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, nearly $1 billion a year. Therefore, making buses free is framed as a solution that increases equity and addresses the fare evasion issue simultaneously.
The intention, as Mamdani frames it, is noble.
It's noble.
Solving the evasion problem while enhancing mobility for the working class.
Okay.
But this is where the detailed financial critique comes in.
Okay.
While $1 billion in evasion is massive, the overall annual operating budget for the MTA is orders of magnitude higher. Sources cite that making all bus routes free means the city is voluntarily forfeiting all bus fare revenue,
All of it.
which critics estimate is anywhere from $500 million to $700 million annually, depending on ridership recovery rates.
So, the policy, according to critics, is likened to having a leaky roof that costs you $1,000 a year.
Right.
And instead of fixing it, you decide to take the roof off entirely, costing you $10,000 in immediate damage, plus untold future repair costs.
That's the metaphor. Precisely. The cost of running a free bus system far, far exceeds the cost of current fare evasion, and this deficit must be covered somehow.
And how do they propose covering it?
Well, the city has two options to cover that massive new structural deficit.
And they are.
Massive service cuts, which Mamdani supporters would oppose, or a significant tax increase, which hits the very capital Mamdani is trying to retain.
So either way, you lose.
It seems so. Critiques point out that specific proposals floated to cover this gap included increasing property taxes on commercial real estate and imposing a higher marginal tax rate on high-net-worth individuals.
The very groups already threatening exodus?
The very same people.
This sounds like a guarantee of capital flight. But beyond the purely financial deficit, critics stress the anticipated social cost, which is harder to quantify but perhaps more impactful on quality of life.
That is the core of the chaos argument.
Explain that.
New Yorkers are already painfully aware of the lawlessness that sources describe as characteristic of some subway danger zones. Things like aggressive panhandling, open drug use, and petty theft. The fear is that the free bus revolution is an open invitation to chaos, causing this lawlessness to spill out on every bus route, every avenue, in every borough.
Why does free necessarily equal chaos in the minds of these critics?
It relates directly to human nature, as cited in the sources. When people don't pay, they don't respect.
I see.
The mechanism of payment, even a small fee like $2.90, acts as a base leak mechanism for establishing order and mutual respect for public space.
A social contract.
A small one, yes. When that requirement is removed, critics argue, it signals that the rules of civilized conduct are also relaxed. We are already seeing clips circulate of increased harassment and assault on existing public transit routes where law enforcement presence is perceived to be low.
Right.
Opponents argue that Mamdani's policy multiplies that unstable environment across the entire surface transit network, making public spaces feel permanently unsafe.
And you mentioned the funding issue, the idea that this fantasy, as it's called, is being funded entirely by New York taxpayers who are already seeing their quality of life diminish.
It is the great irony. Opponents summarize it as moral bankruptcy disguised as compassion.
Wow.
The city accepts the massive operating deficit, shifts the revenue burden onto property owners and workers via increased taxation, while simultaneously eroding the public expectation of order and safety.
So you pay more for less safety.
You pay more for what is perceived as more chaos. For major corporations who rely on employees commuting safely, or for families considering where to raise children, this combination of higher costs and lower perceived safety is a fatal deterrent.
If the free bus plan was a financial drain, the rent freeze announcement was, for many investors, the moment they decided the city was beyond redemption.
It was the tipping point.
This was the rent freeze bombshell. Let's dive deep into the mechanics of this because it's not as simple as just capping prices.
Absolutely. The policy is sweeping. It indefinitely freezes rents on roughly 25% of the city's entire rental housing stock,
A quarter of all rental apartments.
a quarter of the market, specifically the rent-stabilized apartments. Mamdani's administration frames this as immediate justice for the working class, protecting long-term residents from predatory pricing.
But the reaction from Wall Street was not just negative, it was apocalyptic.
That's a good word for it.
We have the famous reaction from hedge fund titan Cliff Asness, who reportedly viewed the policy not as standard regulation, but as a hydrogen bomb for New York's economy.
That term, hydrogen bomb, speaks directly to the destruction of asset value.
How so?
Real estate investment trusts, or REITs, and private property holders rely entirely on predictable cash flow and the ability to adjust rents to cover rising costs.
Sure.
When you indefinitely freeze the income stream on a quarter of a city's rental housing stock, you immediately introduce financial instability, which is poison for debt-backed investments. The perceived value of these assets instantly craters, making debt default a serious concern for many owners.
Let's follow that chain reaction because this is where the structural problems emerge.
Mhm.
What happens when a landlord of a stabilized unit faces fixed income against aggressively rising operational costs?
Their margin vanishes or turns sharply negative.
And we have to remember, owning property isn't passive.
Not at all. Property owners face rising property taxes set by the city, utility costs like heating oil and electricity driven by inflation, soaring insurance premiums, and, most crucially, CapEx.
Capital expenditures.
Exactly. This includes non-negotiable, massive costs, like replacing boilers, maintaining facades, or updating electrical systems mandated by city code.
Things you legally have to do.
You have to. If rents are frozen, a landlord cannot fund a multi-million-dollar CapEx project. They stop investing.
And if they stop investing, the sources suggest we get the infamous 1970s New York aesthetic again.
That is the fear, yes. Buildings decay, deferred maintenance piles up, and neighborhoods deteriorate rapidly.
Graffiti, boarded up windows.
The whole 9 yards. And importantly, it's a legal issue. Landlords who fail to make mandated repairs can be dragged into housing court, face massive fines, or even have the city take control through third-party management, further eroding the property rights framework.
This is downward spiral.
A very fast one.
Now, what about the 75% of renters who are not in stabilized units? How does Mamdani's policy end up indirectly punishing them?
That's the other side of the coin. The city still needs its revenue, primarily generated through property taxes.
Right.
When 25% of the housing stock has a functionally capped tax assessment due to frozen income, the city must necessarily shift the tax burden onto other revenue sources,
So the other renters.
primarily commercial property, and the remaining 75% of non-stabilized rental properties. This creates an acceleration of market rate increases in the non-stabilized sector.
Wait, let me get this straight.
Go ahead.
The policy designed to protect one group ends up indirectly punishing a much larger segment through higher accelerated market rates.
That's the argument, yes. It exacerbates the overall affordability crisis for the vast majority of New Yorkers.
This is the ultimate powerful irony cited by critics.
It is.
A policy aimed at social justice, potentially triggering an urban flight and decay that disproportionately harms the very neighborhoods it was supposed to protect.
While simultaneously raising rents for the unprotected majority.
And this is all happening against a backdrop of what critics describe as rising lawlessness.
That connection between economic flight and public safety is crucial. It's not a coincidence.
How are they linked?
When a city's leadership appears to be hostile to the enforcement of property rights and simultaneously hostile to law enforcement itself, capital reads the tea leaves immediately. They understand that a decline in order always follows a decline in investment.
Let's discuss the public safety crisis. The critical data point here, according to sources, is staggering. The NYPD is at its lowest staffing level since the 1990s, down over 7,000 officers.
1,000.
This is not just a shortage. This is an institutional collapse, especially in a city that relies on a massive, visible police presence.
The 7,000 officers represent a significant percentage of the force, and the impact is immediate.
Like what?
Slower response times, fewer community patrol units, and a reduced capacity for proactive policing.
And critics point the finger where?
Directly to Mamdani's ideological alignment with the DSA platform, which explicitly champions abolitionist language calling for defunding and ultimately abolishing the police and prisons.
So the rhetoric itself is a problem.
The rhetoric, they argue, creates an environment where officers feel targeted, unsupported, and professionally ineffective.
The result is a professional exodus and not just of veterans.
No, that's what's so concerning.
We are seeing younger officers retiring early or relocating. Where are they going, and what is the core reason they are fleeing a high-paying job in the nation's largest city?
They are overwhelmingly relocating to jurisdictions that are politically supportive of law enforcement.
Namely.
States like Texas, Florida, and Tennessee.
And the reasons are twofold, I understand. Practical and psychological.
Exactly. Practically, the high cost of living in New York, combined with the risk of their pensions being destabilized by the city's financial woes, makes a move to a lower tax state extremely appealing.
That makes sense.
But psychologically, sources report that officers are seeking jurisdictions where their badges still mean something.
What does that mean exactly?
It means a place where they feel valued by leadership and protected from what they see as unwarranted political attacks.
And if the staffing collapse weren't enough, we have the policy proposal regarding the Civilian Complaint Review Board,
The CCRB.
which critics see as the final straw in disarming the police institutionally.
Yes, the proposal is to grant this Civilian Compliant Review Board, which is often staffed by community activists, the final say over police discipline.
Final say. Over the police commissioner.
Over everyone. Critics argue this fundamentally alters the accountability structure, turning due process on its head.
How so?
It is perceived as preemptively deeming officers guilty, regardless of internal investigation findings, simply to satisfy an ideological mandate. This level of institutional mistrust, critics warn, makes the job untenable, leading to passive policing and further degradation of public safety standards.
So the cops who stay just stop policing.
That's the fear.
You lose the protectors, and the sources suggest the predators move in. This connects the safety collapse directly back to the economic flight, as neither residents nor businesses will tolerate an unsafe environment regardless of rent prices.
Exactly.
Now let's pivot to the final major policy under this agenda, the plan for government grocery stores. This, for many, is the starkest ideological step.
It is arguably the purest expression of the Democratic Socialist platform implemented at a city level.
What's the proposal?
Mamdani is proposing government-run grocery stores, pitched as a public option for groceries.
And the stated intention.
To address the issue of food deserts, areas lacking healthy food access, and to combat perceived price gouging by large corporate grocery chains.
On the surface, if implemented efficiently, one might argue this sounds like a positive intervention in a city plagued by inequality.
One might argue that, yes.
So why have the alarm bells set off been so visceral, particularly among immigrant communities?
Because for specific communities, this is not a theoretical debate about market efficiency. It is a painful reminder of historical failure.
What do you mean?
Sources cite the perspective of families who fled regimes in Cuba and Venezuela, who are warning New Yorkers directly, this is exactly how it starts.
This is exactly how it starts. That's a powerful warning.
It is.
That specific context is vital. Can we expand on the anecdote referenced in the sources?
Certainly. The fear is rooted in the process of gradual centralization. The sources referenced a specific anecdote from a woman whose family escaped Venezuela. She described how the government initially claimed to be addressing corporate greed by establishing nationalized distribution systems.
Okay.
But once the government seized control of supply chains and assets, like her mother's home and her father's gas stations, the control shifted from distribution to dictation. She warned that the outcome was not lower prices, but scarcity, black markets, and ultimately the government determining what citizens could eat and when.
So it's about control.
It's about total control. For them, a government-run grocery store symbolizes the state's potential to ration and control necessities.
So the narrative suggests that this movie doesn't end with efficient full shelves, but with ration lines, empty aisles, and government ration cards.
Right.
Because centralized control eliminates the market incentives that ensure supply in the first place.
Exactly. The fundamental critique is that Mamdani is seeking to replace the complex, responsive, and efficient logistics of the global food supply chain, which is messy but effective, with bureaucratic management, which history suggests is highly inefficient and vulnerable to political pressure.
And that leads to the powerful symbolic line that critics find so damning.
Which is?
New York City, the undisputed capital of capitalism, now seriously debating how many loaves of bread citizens can take home, while the rest of the nation, operating under market principles, is focused on supply expansion.
It's framed as regression.
A total step backward.
While successful cities across the country focus on reducing regulation and attracting private capital to solve food access problems through innovation, New York is pursuing a model associated with failing socialist states. This ideological choice, critics argue, further solidifies the perception among investors that New York is no longer a serious place to conduct business or hold assets.
That ideological contrast is setting the national stage. This deep dive isn't just about New York, it's about the massive beneficiaries of its failure, which brings us to the Great Migration and the national warning, specifically looking at Florida.
Florida is undeniably serving as the counterpoint, the firewall of liberty, as some sources phrase it.
A firewall of liberty.
They are providing a clear economic and political alternative to New York's governance philosophy. We are seeing major financial firms, real estate developers, and high-net-worth retirees pouring into the state, bringing significant jobs and capital.
Let's detail that contrast in governance. What are the two opposing philosophies being demonstrated here?
In simple terms, New York, under Mamdani, is accused of practicing redistribution and actively punishing success through high taxes and restrictive policies, like the rent freeze.
Right.
Florida, under DeSantis, is practicing fiscal conservatism, low regulation, and actively celebrating success by offering stable tax rates and protecting property rights.
And that contrast.
It creates a massive one-way wealth transfer.
And the movement is so significant that it's physically changing the global financial map.
It really is.
We mentioned the claim that West Palm Beach and Miami have officially surpassed New York as the world's fastest-growing wealth hubs.
Which is a stunning development for Wall Street.
It's an indictment of New York's policy choices.
It has to be. Traditionally, New York's primary advantage was its deep talent pool and proximity to the markets.
Sure, the concentration of talent.
But now, with remote work capabilities and the severe policy risks in NYC, that advantage has been neutralized. Florida offers all the benefits of a robust modern economy with none of the perceived political risks.
So the symbolism here is...
The symbolism is clear. Wall Street is being hollowed out by its own city's anti-capitalist mayor, and the financial gravity is shifting south.
And Governor DeSantis is not merely waiting to catch the fallout.
Not at all. He's being proactive.
He is actively poaching New York's professional class. We have the specific example of the Law and Order 2.0 initiative.
That's correct. DeSantis has been proactive in offering significant signing bonuses and relocation incentives to police officers who are fleeing cities like New York.
Specifically targeting the 7,000 officers Mamdani's city lost.
Exactly. This is a deliberate strategy. He is capitalizing on New York's public safety deficit and simultaneously bolstering his state's own commitment to law and order. It sends a powerful signal to the capital community. We value stability and security here.
It effectively frames Florida as the gold standard of governance, entirely in contrast to New York's perceived descent into ballistic podiatry.
A very clear contrast.
But this failure is also causing immense political pressure and panic, even within the Democratic establishment.
Absolutely. The ideological civil war is now playing out publicly.
What are you hearing?
Sources report that moderate Democrats and key union leaders in New York are furious with Mamdani.
Furious.
They view his radical agenda not just as bad policy, but as unsustainable, reckless, and deeply tone-deaf to working-class realities.
Why are union leaders so concerned? Aren't they usually aligned with progressive mayors?
They are concerned because the very jobs their members rely on, jobs in construction, building maintenance, hospitality, and tourism, are disappearing. The rent freeze halts new development and maintenance projects.
Right. No new buildings.
The capital flight reduces high-end restaurant and hotel usage. The unions see their members' economic security eroding rapidly because the mayor's socialist experiment is driving away the private capital that provides the jobs.
So the people Mamdani promised to fight for
Are now suffering the most immediate economic consequences.
So the irony is layered thick. The people's mayor, who promised to fight for the poor, is driving out the jobs faster than anyone before him.
That's the critique.
This must be impacting the national political calculus.
It is. The whispers inside the Democratic Party are growing louder concerning the potential national implications, specifically looking ahead to 2028.
How so?
Every time a high-profile, radical progressive mayor implements policies that critics view as tanking a global city, it provides an undeniable, highly visible case study for the opposition.
A cautionary tale.
Exactly. This political failure is being framed as the left eating its own.
It provides a live demonstration of what happens when ideology aggressively replaces practical governance and financial stability.
Precisely. It creates an "I told you so" moment for those advocating for moderate or conservative pro-business policies.
So the failure isn't seen as just bad luck.
No, the failure is viewed by critics not as a matter of poor execution, but as proof that Mamdani's core political beliefs are fundamentally incompatible with running a productive, complex global economy. The data point is clear. Radical policies equal flight.
Which brings us to the core warning for the rest of the country. If New York, the massive economic engine of America, can crumble this quickly under this specific brand of socialism, then critics warn that any city can. The crisis serves as a national warning shot.
It forces a national conversation about governance philosophy in a way that is highly visible. While New York is freezing rents, fighting police, and proposing government grocery stores, the alternative scene in Florida and Texas is focused on economic thawing, attracting talent, and protecting law and order.
Right.
The migration map of America is redrawing itself. The freer the state is perceived to be, the more secure its future capital base appears. This perceived New York collapse is being used as a critical data point in that national debate on the balance between regulation and freedom.
This deep dive has highlighted a startling economic and social evacuation, triggered by policies that Mamdani supporters promised would deliver justice and equity, but which critics argue are delivering financial chaos and institutional decay.
Thank you. And thank you to our listeners. This entire situation demonstrates how quickly a fundamental shift in political ideology can trigger massive, irreversible capital flight. And those consequences are playing out right now, reshaping the entire economic geography of the United States.
The Empire State, critics argue, triggered its own evacuation alarm, trading skyscrapers for palm trees and fortunes for ideology. That's all for this deep dive from News Focus podcast. But it leaves us with one haunting question. When a city willfully drives away the very capital that built it, does it seek equity or merely collective ruin?